Okay, well, welcome back to stage two. Thanks for joining us in the room and thanks for joining us online. We're here for the Supplier Relationship Management panel, sponsored by Cooper. And throughout, we'll try and take questions. So catch my eye, put your hand up, and we'll get a microphone to you if you're in the room. If you're not in the room, if you're joining us online from around the world, then just use the app, please. Send me your questions online. They'll come direct to my iPad, and I'll do my best to ask your questions on your behalf. So at any time, if you want to chip in, if you've got questions, just raise your hand, and I'll try and catch your eye. Thank you to our panel for being here. Let me introduce on my right, on your left, I think I've got that right, Jared Glover, Director of Procurement at Santander, Michael Van Curlen, Chief Procurement Officer at Cooper, Adiola Abegunde, Director for Technology Lead at Vestas Wind Systems in Denmark, and Faris Hatter from Hikma Pharmaceuticals. As we all know, supplier relationship management, like words like sustainability, like anything, can mean a million different things to a million different people. So what is best supplier relationship management to you? And in fact, what does best actually mean? So, Jared.
First of all, congratulations everyone for choosing this over the Scope 3 one. Because in the other room, everyone's going to be talking about Scope 3, but unless you're close to your suppliers, you're never going to get over Scope 3. So this one's more important, obviously, because we're all here. But next door, they're going to be talking about how you get close to your emissions through your supply chain. And to do that, you've got to get close to your supply chain. So why is SRM important to me and indeed to my organisation? If you look at your P&L, probably about 50% of your workforce works for someone else. Maybe a little bit more depending on what industry you're in. So why is SRM important for me? Because 50% of the people that I can actually employ to bring out my customer benefit, they work for someone else. And I need to spend time making sure that they're close to my strategy. Because if you have a direct employee and you don't tell them what your strategy is, you're not going to get the outcomes you expect. And it's exactly the same with your supply chain. So that's why it's important for me. What looks good for me, it's how you engage, how you talk to people, how you make sure that they understand that they're part of your team, understand where you're going, and then how you measure those outcomes and make them feel rewarded when they achieve the things that go above and beyond what you're paying them to do in the contract. I don't know. You gents, what's your views?
Well, I think you started off really well. Also, a very good question, Tim, as a start. I certainly believe, it's all about joint value creation between the trading partners, right? So it's not just about me only as a nucleus firm in the supply chain or as a manufacturer or as a trading partner. You need to look beyond the walls of the organization so you can create that value throughout the supply chain between your supplier and you as a client to them. So I firmly believe it's there must be some sort of a joint benefit, joint and mutual benefit between both the organization that you work in as well as your partners, whether it's as a part of the corporate social responsibility or through the business context itself.
Go ahead. I think I probably echo that as well. If you think of what we do in my company, Vestas, we actually do wind turbines, which are huge equipment and all that. And you can't just shift materials from one location to the other. So it's important that you build that relationship with suppliers. And most of our contracts, my organization, are actually with contract organizations, so you have to kind of really have that supplier relationship. So if you build a wind turbine in Brazil, we have to look around Brazil and see who are the people that we can actually partner with. So it's important that we start building that level of relationship with each other. And that's really important because that's the only way we survive right now and we know a lot of manufacturing as we're going outsourced as well. So SRM becomes a very, very critical thing on how you operate across all organizations.
I agree. And it's like if you go back in time a few years ago, of course, we know, we all know what happened, but you typically saw that companies that had thought about supplier relationship management in a way that they are an extension to your own company. And we know the examples in the car industry that ran out of chips. The biggest reason was because they treated their suppliers, let's just say more like a commodity. And then there's that saying, right, that said you need 30,000 things to build a car and only one to not build a car. And so you could really see companies that had thought about supplier relationship management, such as Toyota is an example, they actually had the foresight and they built the relationships with those suppliers so that they actually did not run out of chips. And that was a perfect example. And so what I always encourage is like, look, your suppliers are an extension to your own company. Share your strategic objectives with them. Be very open and transparent, especially with those that are critical to your continuity of your business, because it is fundamental during especially times of constraint. And the companies that have really thought about how to build relationships, how to be transparent, how to be open book, how to share your objectives and understand the objectives of your suppliers, those are the ones that actually went through the pandemic, I'm not going to say unscarred, but at least much more smoothly than a lot of these other companies that hadn't really thought about how to preserve and protect the relationships with your suppliers.
Your company in particular, Cooper, has a helicopter view of many clients. Have you seen a real cultural shift from, dare I call it, an old way of thinking, where supplier relationship management was all about screwing them down to maximise value for you? Have you actually genuinely seen a cultural shift?
Yeah, so every year we do, and I'm not again here to promote the company I work for, although I kind of implicitly do it anyway. But once a year we do distribute what we call our business spend management KPI report. And I encourage you to look at 2021, 2022 onwards, and you'll see a pretty big shift in, for example, things like pre-approved spend. The metrics with the top quartile of our customers, because we have access to their data, as I shared yesterday, you'll see that pre-approved spend and spend under contract, those metrics have significantly improved over the past 4 years. And that is because of what happened and a direct impact of what happened during the pandemic, where companies realized like, hey, I do need to have a much more proactive approach when it comes to managing my spend. I always say approving invoices is kind of a flawed process because you can't influence that, right? I mean, you're going to book and pay it. We really want to shift more towards pre-approved, to the right suppliers with the right pricing, the right SLA, the right KPIs, whatever the terms and conditions are that are relevant for you. And we're seeing those metrics really shifting more to pre-approved, more spent under contract, shorter cycle times, and we're really seeing that in the metrics as well.
And it's really interesting the point you make about COVID and the constriction of supply and how people that had good SRM got ahead and moved forward, because I think we all know that's true. In COVID, it wasn't about price, it was about who, when you picked up the phone, picked it up back to you. Do you guys all see that when we look across not just the constraint, but when you look at the innovation lens and how you beat your competitors to market share and customer gain? Are you seeing benefits from SRM across that as well?
Well, I mean, in the context of pharma, I mean, coming from pharma industry for 15 years, I see this as a challenge. I mean, there's always, price is never the differentiating factor, although it could be in other industries, but, quality is certainly sitting on the top. So, quality and pricing also, are basically one of the key critical factors to take on a new supplier. But thinking of innovation, and again here in the generic space, innovation is really how you can select the right partners and suppliers that can help you drive costs down even more at the time where you are seeing double-digit inflation, you're seeing currency devaluation. It becomes more tricky, I would say, to choose the right partner.
And I think for us, it's more driven, like I said, with contract manufacture, you're actually driven more with co-innovation with your suppliers. And suppliers who are just suppliers that deliver onto you, or suppliers that actually work with you to deliver onto your customers, you actually have that level of criticality in how you see SRM and how you see your co-innovation and how you build those together. So we're at the point where we look at what are we developing together. So suppliers are coming with the parts, we're looking at the blades, how do we make our blades actually more efficient, make it not catch fire when things happen, because we actually have to rely on them to kind of really bring those innovations from the organizations into the overall ecosystem that we have in delivering to our customers.
Yeah. No, agreed. Yeah. I legitimately believe that suppliers have no incentive to bring innovation to you if you treat them like a commodity, irrespective of what you buy. Right? It doesn't matter what you buy, if it's services, goods, if it's hard goods. If you really, with the ones that are critical, if you really open up and I've seen this in my past, and I see this today with our customers as well, the more transparent you are, and I know that sometimes feels a bit scary to us, right? Because we want to hold our cards too close to our chest, and I'm just not going to tell my supplier. No, just be open and transparent, and you'll be amazed what suppliers are willing to share with you, what their strategies is, where they're growing, where they're not growing, if they may be divesting or restructuring or acquiring. Those are the types of things you really need to know from your critical suppliers, and they're not going to share with you unless you have demonstrated your desire to be transparent. I mean, I call it kind of like marriage. And you know, I'm not here to give marriage counsel to everybody before you go like, great, maybe over a drink. But it is like that, right? The more transparent you are with each other, the better you understand each other. And that's what we ask. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess from my side, we see the same. It was really easy to make a business case for SRM in COVID because everyone needed things and you needed to work really closely with the suppliers. It's a lot more difficult to make the business case for innovation because innovation takes a while to ramp up.
Correct.
The tangible return on it takes longer to show. And you've got to really focus and hone down. And I think one of the key things that you need to do for that, which I'm sure you all do because you're all procurement professionals, you understand your job, segment, focus on those suppliers that you think truly understand your strategy, and then spend some time with them sharing more detail than would make you comfortable, exactly as you say.
Yeah.
Because strategic drift exists in your own organisation if you don't tell people about your strategy often enough. It exists tenfold with your suppliers because they're so far away from your end customer. Some of them actually might be closer to your end customer than you in times. Yeah. But you need to spend that time with them working because if you can get one idea that flies, you will make the business case for SRM through innovation. Yeah. Making the business case for SRM through basically scarcity of commodity is easy, but it all too often becomes price focused. And if you're not focusing on innovation, you're really not going to be in the procurement organisation that I would suggest you want to be in, where you innovate and want to move forward and make a change and drive the agenda, including on scope 3, because carbon and developing carbon, you're going to get that through your supply chain. Your supply chain will share with you. They'll look at ways to be more efficient. The most carbon efficient supply chain you can have will also be the most cheaper supply chain you can have. But you're not going to get that unless you talk to them about where you want to go and what you want to do. I don't know if you guys have any...
Yeah, I think I want to agree with that. I mean, being a sustainable energy organization ourselves, one of the things that we did, I think investors, I'm not like promote investors, but I think last year we got the award for the most sustainable company in the world. And part of the things that we did was we went to our suppliers and looked at all the materials. I mean, we've got a lot of materials. I mean, you would imagine a wind turbine, that's about 10,000 parts in it. And we had to kind of really ask them, can you look at where do we save the money? Where do we save the CO2? And we all kind of really had a joint commitment that we all rolled down to the, spend on the sustainability control tower, looking at we all start committing about taking 5%, 10% of all the CO2 on all our parts, and kind of really work with that. And that kind of allows innovation. And some of the things we really push very well, like you are co-innovators with us. There's nothing we can do by ourselves because you can have all the parts in the world, all the ideas in the world, but as long as suppliers are working with you and you can see that the criticality of your connection, of you working together, of the network, then allows you to start building, towards, your overall goal as an organization as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can also shed some light on SRM pre-COVID and post-COVID. I mean, we've seen it firsthand, at the pharma industry, especially when drug shortages were, have been hitting the headlines almost everywhere. We've heard about so many stories of stockpiling of unneeded medications taking space at hospitals at the expense of medications that were short. And that's where, I would say the moment where SRM took a different, lens at the board level and at the companies, globally, they started giving more attention to how can we collaborate with our trading partners and suppliers so we can respond in more agility and become more responsive to, the demand of hospitals and patients. And it became more apparent that the rule of the 3 V's, which is if you increase visibility throughout the supply chain and if you increase velocity of information sharing between trading partners, you reduce variability. You reduce supply variability, you reduce demand variability, and you become more successful in delivering, the end product to your, to your clients. And, I felt that post-COVID, it became more of a center of attention where we're not just dealing with suppliers as a source of raw materials or a bright stock or semi-finished product. We're looking at them in a different lens as a profit sharing, joint R&D, joint capacity, building capacity together, thinking, one step ahead, bringing your suppliers up with you. But, I understand also this doesn't happen to all your 4,000 suppliers in your organizations. You need to do this properly throughout a segmentation approach. Whom are the critical, whom are the bottleneck suppliers that we need to take on?
I wanted to pick that very point up because not that I know much about pharma, but in pharma you have thousands and thousands and thousands of suppliers, and most of them in highly technical businesses, and I'm sure it applies across all industries. So can you give our colleagues watching in the room and on the online room some tips from your experience and ideas of how you segment and how you choose and how you manage that vast volume of within your supply chain?
Well, yeah, there's, different approaches. Some companies would tend to think of it, if, you have bottleneck suppliers that are really responsible. If you don't get this material, you're going to stop production. This material would impact, multiple SKUs at your organization. So there are different ways. The most common is the ABC segmentation that you do. You categorize it based on priority, based on availability. Do you have local supplier versus dependency on multiple diverse in different geographic locations. In pharma, it's quite more difficult to approve more suppliers because you need to go through regulatory path, stability, having the product well tested to qualify a new supplier. So I would say in pharma it's more hectic to manage the current suppliers and ensure you are always transferring the information at the right time to them without not just sharing forecasts but even beyond that, beyond purchase order sharing and sharing forecasts. You need to tell them what's happening in the business. And we've seen also that in many suppliers that are keen to know more of what's happening in the market, the suppliers would know more than the manufacturer or even the distributors that are closer to the patient. The reason is because they're anxious and it impacts their existence in the supply chain, that they are they go all the way out to learn more about what's happening in the market. So I think back to your first question, I think it's there are many ways to segment them. Most common is ABC approach. Depends on priority and if there's a second source or not. The other one is the impact on the organization financially and ethically on the availability of the drug.
Do we want to see if there's questions in the room? Like any questions here in the room? Sorry, I don't want to take over your role. I'm sorry.
You preempted and quite correctly. Can we have a microphone to
Let's get some
the person?
energy going.
No, thank you. Quite right.
Hi there, my name's Anna. I'm with the Hackett Group. I speak to clients quite regularly about SRM. What they tend to say is it's often a tick box exercise. They don't always have the time to do it. Just wanted to ask, how do you actually embed SRM within your teams? How do you actually drive value from it?
I can just give it a quick go. I think the first thing that's really important is that as a procurement function, we have partnerships internally, so that we are not just considered, hey, we're running an RFP, we throw it over the fence, contract is done, contract is signed, toss it over the fence to the business and say, see you in 3 years. Right? So I think the first thing where it starts is internal partnerships. And often I see procurement teams still feeling they're more tactical, even if you're running RFPs, that's still very tactical, and that we lack that true partnership with our business. That's where it starts. And then we need to encourage our internal business partners to have quarterly business reviews that we schedule for the entire year, if you will, and including our suppliers that are relevant, following a segmentation that you just described, and that you align on a format and a template that can be repeatable. And I'm happy to share my templates that I use, and I'm sure you guys would be open to this as well. So we can have a repetitive process that is not very laborious, and we align on what the key metrics are, performance metrics, what we want to share with those suppliers, and a lot of it is rinse and repeat. So if you don't have time for SRM, I'd say make time and start with maybe 10 suppliers. They maybe not with 50, but maybe start with 10. But I mean, templatize it, make it a structured, standardized process, aligning with your business partners internally, and then roll this out. It is not very difficult.
I think you've got to understand your business maturity as well.
Yeah.
If your business maturity is at a point where you're just receiving goods and materials, you're not going to be able to do SRM that well. If your business maturity is at a point where you're receiving services and you understand the services you receive and you manage the services, then SRM might be ready. But if you're just receiving goods, you're not going to be ready. And I think we talked a little bit about segmentation here. So just to kind of key back to that, you're going to have a lot of suppliers you spend a lot of money with. You will probably think to yourselves, I spend a lot of money with them. They're probably ripe for SRM. But if they're just not into you, they're not into you. You know, I'm a fan of all the rom-coms. If someone doesn't fancy you, no matter how much time trying to make them love you, it's not going to work. So, you know, Microsoft probably don't fancy me that much, but someone else might want to. Yeah. Big global providers probably aren't that ready to enter this deep romance with me, but some people might be. And you've just got to test that vibe and find that romance. And once you get deep into that romance, it's going to build, and you know, maybe later you'll get married. But find out if they're into you first. If they're not into you, give it up.
See, we have got marriage guidance counselling.
Like a double act. Yeah,
I love it. It's perfect.
we had a question come in from a member of our online audience named Alison here. So if I can read it out to you, and she writes, Vodafone talked of a no-touch process. Does this work when quality is more subjective and stakeholder involvement is critical, such as language services? How do you align and balance procurement process automation with selection and management of this type of supplier? Who wants to pick that one up?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I'll probably have a go at this because one of the things that we've done now, we've kind of really worked heavily on, is the business network with our suppliers. And the business network means that it's not just the business network, but the technology of it. And one of the things that we've done is kind of really have our shared platform with all our suppliers, all our key suppliers right now. And that's the key. And for us, we look at things like from time we start from our forecast, we have a focused collaboration where from the same portal, ourselves and our supplier over the business network can see what our forecast is. Right, and allows both of us kind of start planning together and working together. And same thing goes down, you know, around our value chain into even a subcontracting process, where up to our component suppliers and subcontractors all have the same visibility of where we're sharing with them. And that can really allows us that level of collaboration, especially with technology, with all our suppliers. I think for us it's very key in how we manage all our suppliers. One of the things we've sold to them when we started, you know, doing the collaboration journey, the business network journey, say, we do have the same visibility, we have the same measurement, both of us, and we have the same, and you talked about that earlier, same data structure. So we all have same, so at the end of the day, we all can make the same decisions, and you have visibility about on-time info, when you're delivering, when you're changing the prices, you have the level of visibility of all through the value chain of your delivery with us.
Yeah, I think the specific thing that I really like what you're talking about, when you're thinking about SRM, please don't just stop at tier one, right? Again, if you go back to COVID, India goes in lockdown. I spoke to CPOs within our own community that said, oh, it didn't really buy, I don't really, you know, I'm not really worried because I'm not sourcing anything out of India. Well, guess what? Your suppliers do, or your suppliers of your suppliers do. So when you think about criticality of your suppliers, understanding their supply chain, and maybe even the supply chain of their supply chain, and go to tier 3, it is super critical. And I've been burned in the past, transparently, because I actually didn't have that level of transparency. And maybe a factory went in shutdown, maybe there was political unrest, maybe there were import duties. You can come up with a whole slew of different challenges that can happen. And if I didn't understand that actually in tier 2 or tier 3, I may have a reliance that I'm not aware of, that could actually impact my business continuity. And so when you think about SRM, I encourage everyone not just to think about tier 1, but also talk about tier 2, and try to create a level of transparency so that you truly understand implications, and then build those what-if scenarios, which is, I think, what we do together with the supply chain. Right? I mean, it's kind of... Okay, yeah.
Any other questions in the room before we... Yeah, there's a gentleman at the back. Yeah.
Hi, I was just interested in, you were talking about the marriage anecdote earlier with Microsoft, and I was wondering to what extent when the skill sets that you look for now when you're building up a good SRM team, to what extent do you look for that ability for relationship management, getting suppliers on board? Because I dare say there's probably lots of ideas that your suppliers could give you to formulate your business plans and help you to move forward. So is that equally as important as the technical skills to get those softer elements where, you know, Microsoft may want to marry you?
I'm beginning to regret mentioning Microsoft now. I await that email in the morning. So you do. From my point of view, we need different skill sets. So as we look towards the evolution of procurement over the next 5 years, you are naturally going to need different skill sets anyway, because we're going to move from being data generators to data consumers. So you need people that are more analytical, that understand more and are closer to the business, and can utilise relationships for good. So I completely agree with you that relationship skills is very important. So when I talk to my team about what I want them to do out with our supply chain and with those people that are our key partners, we separate that away from the category teams. And we talk to people who go and manage those QBRs. So we also have a QBR system. And go and sit with the suppliers and say to them, this is where we're going. Where are you going? What part of that journey overlaps? You know, how much do you value us? Because, you know, I'll have a lot of suppliers that will come in and tell me that I'm a chairman's accountant, I'm very important to them, and I've never met their chairman, just so you know. But I'm very important to them and very important, and therefore they're going to do a lot for me. But the things they're going to do for me are on their roadmap that they're giving to all the rest of their customers. I have suppliers that come in and say, what's your problem? Tell me about it. And then I have this really golden thread of suppliers that come in and say, I think you've got a problem. Here's my view on what your problem is. And those ones openly, so I'm in banking, so those ones hold accounts with us and execute as a customer so they can understand things and they get really close. And my SRM team, it's key to keeping those people engaged. But in the same way that I talked about them being almost like your own employees, they have to make sure that those people feel valued. Because if they don't feel valued, they are never going to come back with anything else. And they need to know when we stop doing things, why. Because we don't necessarily stop doing things because they're a good or bad idea. We stop doing them sometimes because we've got internal constraints that to the outside person would make absolutely no sense at all. And it'll be the same in all of your organisations, that people will look from the outside and say, it should work this way. And inside the organisation, you'll know it works like this. So getting that feedback loop, making them feel valued, working the relationship, but underneath that, having those analytical skills, I think are incredibly important, and over the next 5 years become more so.
No, great, well said.
There's another need for a microphone over here.
There was a little bit of marriage counseling there as well.
Yeah, I'm doing my best, yeah.
I just want to recognize it.
Hi, excuse me, James Butcher, supply chain consultant. You opened the session by saying that SRM means many different things, and I just wondered whether we've just highlighted that to some extent, because, Michael, you've talked about this need to basically understand all the way down to tier 3, at the same time start with 10 suppliers. And even that question there, is there a big difference between that supplier relationship management with those people who want a relationship, continue that analogy, and the need to also engage every supplier at some level? And I just wonder whether that's...
Yeah, so you know, it's about maturity, and I think you talked about maturity. I kind of very high level talked about procurement maturity yesterday. Again, if you want to see that ebook, I'm happy to email it to you guys. But it's about maturity. So SRM also has maturity. It's not that you start with, like, you know, some people think about SRM as like this massive project, and it just becomes daunting and you'll never get started. So what I'm trying to say here is, like, get started, pick 10 suppliers, run them through a QBR in a methodical way that is repeatable, and then start to expand. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, when you think about SRM, it is really critical that we don't just focus on tier 1 suppliers. Yeah. Because you're going to get burned, I guarantee you. At some point, someone is going to fail, and you didn't have that level of visibility. Now, not with all your suppliers. Like if it's office supplies, you know, I love the partnership we have with Staples and with Amazon for Business and whatever, but it's not super critical to my business, right? But when you think about, I came from retail at Lululemon, if we would run out of shopping bags, I guarantee you I get a phone call from the CEO. So my relationship with my shopping bag supplier is very, very different. And it sounds quite basic to you guys, but just think about it. If you walk into a store, you have no bag, the experience is not good, right? So I'm just trying to give you an example of, like how you treat different suppliers in a different way. Not all suppliers deserve or need an SRM type of methodology, but you got to get started. Like, don't turn this into like, go ahead.
Sorry, I think that loops back to the question from Alison related to Ninian. So when is it right to have something that you don't touch, and when is it right to have something that you do touch? And basically, SRM, you're going to look for two things. How you create value, so you want to touch suppliers that can create value for you, and how you protect the value. So you're going to have suppliers that are at a degree of risk that will put you, not necessarily out of business, but they'll cause a constraint in things you do. Yeah. So that, again, going back to the segmentation approach, you've got to think about both those lenses. Clearly, what I want to talk about to my execs more is that value creation, because it's more interesting, bit more exciting. They might marry me off the back of it. Keep that analogy going. But they might divorce me if the value protection goes wrong.
Yeah. No, I firmly believe, there's a Pareto rule there. There's, 20% of the suppliers responsible for 80% of the business continuity and business sustainability. So you don't have to do it, but with the 4,000 suppliers in the pharma supply chain, because they're dispersed across all geographies, continents. But you need to keep track of tier 1, tier 2, and possibly, why not even tier 3. We know it's complicated, but, understanding what will impact the, your supplier in China to India until you get the product in the US is crucial. Otherwise, it may have catastrophic events, and we lived it. It's not something that it didn't happen. The drug shortages nowadays are at peak. You have more than 400 products between cancer medications, antibiotics, out of stock. So, and it is mainly, because of the lack of visibility of throughout the supply chain.
Yeah, and then the last thing, and then we can get more questions, is don't underestimate the power of technology.
Yeah.
Okay, there is great technology out there that can help you manage your supply chain and the risk in your supply chain. Okay.
I think it's interesting because most of the risk we have in supply chain is in the end-tier suppliers, not with your immediate suppliers. It's a very good example probably for us because we use off minerals. So you have conflict materials coming in from conflict regions. Your immediate suppliers won't have that, but most likely your end-tier suppliers will have that. So understanding the supply chain risk is not just with your immediate suppliers, first or second tier, but more of the end-tier suppliers, because that's where you get the raw materials from. These are things that are coming in through to yourself, and that's where most of the risk that you have in your supply chain actually is, more than immediately with the suppliers that deliver directly into you.
And presumably, it's going to be technology that gives you that visibility.
Absolutely.
Which we haven't got time to open up the big topics of AI and data. But I mean, unless that's right, and unless you have the right tech, you haven't got that visibility, and you're going to fail on so many fronts.
Absolutely.
No. I'm looking at my hand up. Time for one last question. Sure. Thank you.
I just want to ask, think about from the other perspective, think about buyer relationship management. When you think about your suppliers doing something for you rather than you do something for them, do you have any examples that worked really well for you so that you can ask the same from your other suppliers?
Great question.
Yeah, I mean, I can give it a shot. So everyone knows Lululemon, right? I like to always give concrete examples. Anybody familiar with third-party gift cards? What they are? When you walk into a supermarket, you have gift cards. You got Apple and whatever. Lululemon was never there, and no one wanted to touch it at Lululemon. It's a true story, and I know I'm being recorded. We are vertically integrated as a retailer. So think about it as you cannot buy Lululemon anywhere else than in our stores and online, right? There's no Nordstrom or whatever the equivalents are in Europe. So you can only buy Lulu at Lulu. And the reason why the head of retail didn't want to deploy this is why would we show up at Walgreens, right? My gift card supplier said to me, why are you guys not at gift malls? And I had no good answer. And the reason why the supplier brought it to me is because we had a really strong partnership with these guys. And so long story short, you can now find Lululemon gift cards that was driven by my supplier. I mean, ultimately it became a procurement idea, and it's generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And it's a perfect example for me that a supplier would have only given us that idea with the right level of partnership, and it's now driving. And I can give you more examples in stores with mannequins and hangers and gift boxes, where suppliers were opening up and giving me competitive edge, innovation, that we would have not thought about otherwise. And the same in the product, yeah? I mean, you know the product as well. So I hope that was helpful.
We're out of time, but this is too interesting to stop. Any other examples of where good supplier management has really increased profit?
Well, and I think, we've seen it also firsthand, creating that visibility from the suppliers down, all the way down to the, hospitals. So we've seen suppliers coming to us telling us, we've seen so much competition in that part of the, products. Maybe we should collaborate to take on more volumes and reduce costs together. So this was more of a profit-sharing agreement that we worked on together. We created that type of partnership, and we both eventually won the product in the government tender, which helped us reduce the cost, and we made the product available, most importantly, to patients.
Yeah. And so we ran our first supplier event this year, which was a roaring success, and all done by my team, nothing to do with me. I just turned up and spoke. And we set a target. The aim from that supplier event, we brought all our key suppliers together. We talked to them about our strategy. We had 3 or 4 members of the C-suite talk to them. The success measure for me for that is if we can get one idea that flies from it, will be a success. We think we generated 65 ideas on the day. We think we've got 4 out of it that will go.
Yeah, and if I may, just real quick, I know we're at time. So we did supplier days as well. And it's not just us sharing with the suppliers. What it created was suppliers start talking to each other.
Yeah.
And some of them are competitors, yeah? But they together actually realize, hey, you know what, maybe we can collaborate. Yeah. And I mean, the what do you call it? The flywheel effect of supplier day, I mean, that is very mature, so I'm glad you have that. I mean, that is where you want to be, because suppliers collaborate with suppliers. And that's where it just becomes almost like a gift that keeps on giving. Yeah, it's a great point.
Brilliant. Well, look, we've hardly scratched the surface, but we've got great ideas on supplier relationship management and some brilliant marriage guidance advice as well, which is more than we ever expected. Thank you so much, gents on stage. Thank you in the room and online. We're taking a networking break for 20 minutes, but Jared,
Thanks,
Michael,
everybody, yeah.
Adiola, and Faris, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.